apostle said to the Lord, increase our faith. He replied, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted, planted in the sea, and it will obey you. So faith, just the size of a mustard seed. And that's real puny. And it's not much at all when you think about it. It's a small thing, a very small thing, and yet there is such significance within that small, simple thing that Jesus himself says, that's the faith that you need, that's the faith that I desire out of you, that is the faith through which God can accomplish amazing things. And like the intro video was talking about, not magic tricks or not, oh, I can make this crazy thing happen because I've got a mustard seed in my pocket and Shazam! It's not that at all. But about, where's your faith? A lot, a little, but placed in what or in whom? We all have faith. We all have faith in something. We all have this consistency of belief or trust. Whether the quantity is great or small, we live every day with a sense of, well, that's just what's going to happen. You know, I trust when the stoplight is green that I can go ahead and go on forward, and the guy on the opposite corner where it's red isn't going to decide to plow into me. Because that's the way it's supposed to work, right? I trust that when my paycheck is deposited in the bank is going to have that same amount of money there that when I need it, I can access it. They give you the money that I earn. I trust that if we were to go to a national park, we could get in. And there are certain things that we take on faith on a daily basis because either our experience or our reason teaches us that this is something that I don't have to make a big decision about. We don't wake up in the morning and say, now is today the day the sun shall rise in the east? What do you think? Is it maybe today? Maybe tomorrow? No. We just know that that's the way things work. That's the way things are. And based off of that experience, based off of that reason, sometimes just based off of that habit, we go through day-to-day life with much faith. Honestly, it isn't so much about the size of our faith, it is where is that faith located, or in whom is that faith located. To have the faith of the mustard seed in God our Father, rather than the stoplight or the bank, rather than governmental budgetary issues, or the sun rising and setting, first in the east and then in the west. That our trust is placed first and foremost in God himself. And when that is the case, great things can happen. And if it only has to start off like this, it's not much. With all the things he could have used that were so very, very small, isn't it something that he chose an object that when cared for properly and under the right circumstances will grow? You plant a seed and it grows. Under the right circumstances, with the right nurturing, nutrition, the soil, the water, the warm sun above, and what looks very small, very boring, very plain, very simple, can become something great. It can grow. And it can blossom. Great things can happen. And it only takes this much. It's got to start from somewhere. And even big things may come from something very, very small and very, very simple indeed. This faith then, something that might be nurtured within us and grow, still must start off with something small and something simple, And Jesus, I think, is pointing to the necessity of at least this small thing. It is enough, but you do have to have it. This faith, which is ultimately a gift from God himself. But you do have to have at least somewhere to start, and at least a seed, which might then be nurtured and grow. So when we say it has to start somewhere, even if it's very simple, or even if it's very small, I would liken that then to the same sense of trust and commitment that is simple and it is small. I will trust you, Lord, even if I don't totally get it, even if I don't completely understand it. I will follow you, I will obey you, because that's just the way that it is. Like the sun rising in the east and setting in the west, that's just the way that it is. And that may not seem like much. But Jesus says even that is enough. And even that might grow. And even that can accomplish, through the mercy of God, great things. Very childlike faith. It's very small, unsophisticated, very simple. But this is one of those times where simple does not mean stupid. Simple means clear, straightforward, unencumbered by unnecessary complications. Kids naturally gravitate towards that kind of faith, don't they? They trust you. There is commitment there. And it is Jesus who says that there is something about the faith of children that we not only ought to learn from, we ought to emulate. Doesn't he talk about having the faith like a child? Not childish, but childlike. Simple, straightforward, pure. Like that small, simple seed. Do you trust in the Lord on a fundamental level, simply and unadorned with complications? Yes or no, because that is what is necessary. And that is what is required. It is not our precise and accurate theology. It is not even our depth of understanding. It is that small, simple, pure faith like a child that says, I trust you. I believe in you. I will follow you. The faith of a child is no less significant than that of an adult. I can run theological circles around my 9-year-old son. It's true. I've got more church history in my little finger than my 6-year-old daughter has in her whole brain. And yet, what does the Lord desire of us first and foremost is to trust Him. And they can do that even at that age. And it is simple, and it is pure, but it is good, and it is strong. That's what we are asked to do. To start somewhere, and then it should grow. I'm not dismissing doctrine and understanding. Me of all people, I love doctrine. But to say it has to start commonly with us all, young or old, with that seed. Small, simple, but right and good. And then as our bodies and our minds and our spirits mature, and we ought to be loving the Lord with all of our heart, soul, and mind and strength, as our capacities grow, that understanding might deepen, that knowledge might grow. Like a fine wine, we age and become more complex and deep. And that is good and a blessing. It still has to start somewhere. And underneath all of that growth and complexity and maturity, must there not still be something that is simple and small and good and true? And small seed. Faith is a gift. The Lord chooses to bless us with it, and then we might partner with Him to nurture it and to nourish it and to watch it flourish and blossom and grow. That the faith of a child might deepen in age to the mature faith of an adult. But it still comes from somewhere, even if it starts off small. Ultimately, it comes from God Himself. But how many of us have experienced the blessing of seeing that faith come from God through another? And to have that small seed planted through the efforts, through the life, through the witness, through the love of somebody else. I am reminded of your sincere faith, Paul writes to Timothy, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you as well. For this reason I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. Be reminded of the context of this before we go any further. Paul is writing to Timothy, a young man who he has helped raise up in the faith and has left in Ephesus to be a pastor and leader of the church. Paul is now a prisoner in Rome, and he knows that his execution date approaches. These are quite possibly some of the last words that Paul writes. And knowing that his death is coming soon, Paul wants to write to Timothy. He wants to encourage him. He wants to see him again. But with poignant final words, these are the sorts of things that Paul wants to make sure Timothy knows. He talks in this introduction and greeting about Timothy's faith. He commends it. He reminds him it is a gift of God that now ought to be rekindled and fanned into a great flame. But where did that gift come from? From God through, he mentions himself with the laying on of hands, through Timothy's ordination, through his training and investment by Paul into him. And it comes from somewhere else, doesn't it? A faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice. He learned his faith from his mom, from his grandmother. And my guess is there are many of you who can say the same. That our faith comes as a gift from God, but in your life, has it not also come through the life and the witness and the love of someone else? Did it come from your mother, maybe? Did she bring you to church? Try to raise you in the faith? Did her mother bring her when she was very small? Maybe it wasn't a mother, maybe it was your father. His father was older. Maybe it wasn't even your family, but there was someone else who gave a darn. Who did what they could through their efforts, through their manner of life, through the way that they lived, through how they cared for you, to show you this faith and pass along what started as a seed in them, as a seed now in you. Whether it was a mother or a grandmother, whether it was a friend, but someone who could show you what that faith looked like. Day to day, when it was easy, when it was hard, when it was bright and sunny, when it was dark and stormy. Someone who could say, oh man, I know what it's like. I know it's hard. But you only need to have this much. Put it in the trust and care of the Lord and watch what He can accomplish in it and through you. And what this ought to do, I think, is a couple of things. The first is, if there has been someone in your life who might be commended for the faith which is now grown in you, be thankful. Timothy is commended for his great faith. Timothy is encouraged as he is now a leader within the church. But that faith has come from somewhere, and Timothy ought to be grateful, and so can we. For my guess is that somewhere, somehow, someone was used by God to bless you, to invest in you, and to plant a seed. Be thankful. If it's someone that you can thank, for they remain with you in this mortal life, then thank them. Give them a call. Give them a hug. Show them the gratitude that the Lord used them to bless you. And if not, if there is no one left in this mortal life that you can thank for this occasion, then thank God that He blessed you with that person or those people who have now gone on before and wait with great expectation and hope for a glorious reunion. And you can thank them. Now, there might be some of us here that we don't really have a connection that we can draw to directly. The gift of faith the Lord has invested within you through some other manner. Through your study, through your contemplation, through a bolt of lightning from the blue sky. That's where the second part comes from. Because no matter how the Lord has invested this faith within you, each of us, whether we have someone in particular to be grateful for, or whether God nurtured this faith just graciously as a gift, now there might be someone looking to you who can see that mustard seed within your mind and who can be invested in, cared for, loved, so more seeds can be planted, can be propagated, and there could be a great, miraculous harvest throughout the world. Maybe it is your children. Maybe it is your grandchildren. Maybe it will be a friend or a neighbor or a co-worker, but through your manner of life, through the way that you can express your faith, showing that even a mustard seed through the dark and hard and stormy times can be sufficient for the Lord to see you through. There are those who are looking for that and desperately want to know that it's true. And maybe their example, maybe God's gift lies within you. And one day, 20 years from now, when they are commended for their great faith, for what they have brought to the church and for the cause of the gospel, they too will say, and thank you for the seed that you planted within me. We've all heard Amazing Grace before. Maybe we can count it in the thousands or millions of times, at least it feels that way. We've heard Amazing Grace. For some, it is profound and touching no matter how many times you've heard it. And for some, it feels like old hat and come on, can we just go to something else because it's a little too familiar. I heard a pastor once explain how he uses Amazing Grace within his church. It has changed the way I've heard it ever since. And no matter how many times I hear it, I still go back to this. Some of you have heard this because I've preached it at a funeral before. But I think this is one of those times where it bears repeating. You see, this old wise pastor told me, everyone gets to sing the first verse. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. For that is God's common grace for any sinner in any condition who would turn to the mercy of God. But that's also the verse that we've heard a million times. But don't stop there, sing the whole thing. However, when we get to verse number 3, only the people under the age of 40 are allowed to sing verse 3. Only the people who are still young within their relationship with God and in this mortal life sing these words. The Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be as long as life endures. For those are words of promise and mustard seed-like faith that I trust and believe that God will keep His promise. I don't know that yet, but I'm committed. And I trust Him. And I will believe that God keeps His promises. He says then, when you get to verse 4, the next one, only people over the age of 60 are allowed to sing verse 4. If you're between 40 and 50, I think you're on your own. But only those people who have been there and done that can sing these following words with true conviction. For it is the words of experience, in season and out, in hard times and in good, those who have more life to look back upon than to look forward to, can say these words with the depth of meaning aged like fine wine. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. It is for those who have seen God's promises, not as an abstract thing or even as a hope they might trust in, but in their life experienced the truth. I have been delivered through those dark nights and those hard times. And there were those instances where I thought, I can't even lift my head anymore. But the graciousness of God and the love of His people, they brought me through. There were sometimes they picked me up and they carried me. And to you who are young, I speak to you with experience that what you are trusting in is true. Those are seeds, some of which are very new, and some of which are quite mature. They might bear good fruit and then be spread to others who still need to know that the mercy of God can do great things in their lives, in the good times and in the bad. So be thankful for those whom the Lord has used to place that gift within you, but it is now your turn. Someone is waiting to hear you sing these words to them with experience, with maturity, and with truth, so the seed might be planted in their heart and one day blossom and grow and be passed along to yet another generation still to come. For faith is a gift from God. But it is a gift so often He uses others to deliver. As it has been offered to you, invest and love, pass along, and plant those seeds in someone else so that they might grow and continue to pass along. For all it takes, for all this to happen in your life